In this video, I'm going to show you how I have 3 Volvos, all automatic transmissions. Yes, that's right. That is very boring, all automatic transmissions that are all shifting, hopefully almost perfect. So this here is my 99. Again, 99 is getting a lot of attention. This one has a 4-speed automatic. If you have a 98 or an 850, it's also going to have the 4-speed automatic, which is probably going to be the more reliable one, ignoring the manual, of course. So these transmissions don't have filters in them, which means you need to change the fluid a lot more frequently than a car that has a filter, for example. So these cars, they have dipsticks. Of course, they do. All car companies have gotten rid of the dipsticks now, so it is a little more difficult to check it. But on this car, here is the dipstick. As you can see, there's my fluid. And if you have 2000 or older, then come over here and see, this is the automatic 5-speed. The dipstick is down there. Not sure if you can see it, but it's a little harder to get to. And the 5-speed automatics are the ones with problems typically. So the 4-speed don't have a lot of issues. You just have to keep them maintained and change the fluid. But the 5-speed have issues. So this one here is my 2002 C70. It only has 60,000 miles, and even with that, 3 of the 3 solenoids in the transmission had to be replaced to get this working correctly. Now these solenoids are defective from Volvo, so yours might be failing. Now you'll have to maybe do some more research if you're having a problem with your solenoids. But in the 4-speed, it shouldn't have issues like that. So you went to the mechanic or you go to a shop and you're asking them, do I do a drain and fill or do I do a flush? They typically will answer you, they'll be mixed. Some people will say do a drain and fill, other people will say do a flush. Here's what I did. So I don't have my 98 right here, but my 98 has 185,000 miles. It shifts just as good with this one with 110,000 miles. And what I did with that one, now that obviously we didn't go through the original fluid with that one. That one was flushed at about 80,000 miles, but unfortunately it was flushed with the incorrect fluid, so the car actually shifted a little rough all the way to about 170,000 miles. Or then what I did is I did 2 drain and fills and then had it flush. And this car, so far I've done, for this 99 here, this one has been on its original fluid all the way to 109,000 miles, which is definitely not something you want to do with a transmission. And this one, well, what I did with this one is, so far I've done 4 drain and fills. This is going to be the 5th drain and fill. Now right now this car has 111,000 miles, and so in terms of when should you change the fluid, this car, when you would shift it into drive, it would actually almost stall because the fluid had so much stuff floating in it. Now I live somewhere where there's a lot of dust. If you look at this engine here, I just cleaned it probably 8 months ago and it's already coated with dust all over it. Because where I live, there's dust storms, and so a lot of dust likes to get in the transmission. And this is where it's typically where your transmission may get damaged because a lot of particles get into it and you just don't change the fluid. Now, depending on where you live, you may have to change the fluid more often or less often. Where I live, in the summertime, it gets hotter than 120 degrees. And that is enough to cause these Volvos to slightly overheat. So now, what fluid do you use? I would just stick with the OEM fluid. Now, if you go to Volvo, the fluid is pretty expensive. These transmissions are made by Aisin. So, okay, so Volvo does not make their own fluid. So the best one you can go with is this one here. This is the Aisin OEM fluid. Aisin supplies the transmission fluid to Volvo. So this is essentially the Volvo fluid, just in a cheaper bottle. You can get this bottle on FCP or IPD. I got mine off of IPD. I got some of them off IPD, some of them off FCP. Now, when you do a drain and fill, you should have, for the 4 speeds, you should have about 3.2 quarts come out, so you need at least 4 quarts for one drain and fill. And that's what I'm going to be doing here. Now, I would definitely not recommend you go immediately to the flush. That's when you may lose a gear, because you have a bunch of stuff in the pan that gets stuck in the pan, clutch material, dust, everything likes to go and that gets stuck in the pan. And so if you immediately flush it, it's very likely that what's going to happen is all this stuff is just going to come back up through the channels of the transmission and clog it up, and then you might lose a gear. You'll have to take all that out and clean it out. So it's definitely much better to do at least one drain and fill before you flush it, if you want to flush it. Now what I do is I did have to flush 2 of my cars, my 98 and my 2002, and the reason for that is because, well, the 98 had the incorrect fluid flushed through it some years ago, so I wanted to get all that old fluid out, and the 2002 had 3 solenoids replaced, but I don't know if the correct fluid was used, so I just flushed it with basically Volvo fluid, or the aisin fluid. Alright, so now, let's see. Alright, here's everything you're going to need. An adjustable wrench, a long funnel, because you're going to refill it through the dipstick, and then at least 4 quarts of aisin transmission fluid. Now, these transmissions, they have dipsticks, they're not sealed, that's how a lot of dust can get in them. And even new transmissions, if a car says in the owner's manual it's a lifetime fluid, you should look at the manufacturer of that transmission and find out when they want it, basically when they want you to change it, because in a transmission, there's no lifetime fluid in it. Lifetime is, if you never change it, probably 160,000 miles, and then you have to replace the transmission, which is not great. Okay, next we also have a crush washer. It's the same crush washer as you would use for the oil drain. You don't have to replace it every time. You can definitely reuse the one that's on there. And definitely you're going to need, pull that out, put that there. You're going to need a new O-ring here. The old one is probably going to be destroyed, and dirt, dust just loves to get down into the dipstick. Now, before you change it, you definitely want to make sure there's no metal in it. So, first thing is checking the dipstick. Now, mine was really, really dark. I'll see if I have a sample of the first drain I did, because it was very dark, but if there's metal in it, it should look like metallic paint, basically. Now, after you do the first drain and fill, you're definitely going to want to check that oil or the transmission fluid you just drained out to make sure that there's not too much metal in it. There is going to be wear in the transmission, but you don't want it to look like metallic paint. So now I'm going to go under the car and drain this. Alright, I'll put this out so that hopefully it will flow faster and anything that's in the pan will come out. I would say that in my 98, I did have I guess you would call them lumps of dirt and wear material from the transmission come out. And that was pretty disturbing. I did not have this on this car. This car's fluid was just really, really nasty. But this is the 5th drain and fill, so it should be pretty clean. Another thing I did is that I removed my IPD skid plate. Now I didn't remove it because it's in the way of changing transmission fluid. There's a hole in it for that so that you don't have to take it off. But my turbo oil supply line decided to leak, so I had to remove it to replace it, and then now I'm just going to put it back on after I'm done doing this drain and fill. So here we are under the car. This is typically what people see. People typically don't have a skid plate under here, so make it look a little better. So here it is. I just cracked it loose, and I guess let's see what's going to come out. Alright. Got the seal on there. Oh yeah, put that everywhere. Now, even though this is the 5th drain and fill, this fluid is still quite dark. Now, there's a magnet on here. See that focus? Doesn't need. There it is. I'll show you in the light. Then I'm gonna let this drain for about 10 minutes, and then I will refill it. Alright, it is draining now. So one other thing I need to mention is that what'll happen is if you don't change your coolant often enough, the radiator will actually corrode and leak coolant into the transmission. You need to make sure this is not happening because water dissolves the clutches that are in the transmission. You definitely don't want that to happen. Now here is the plug. I have not cleaned it off, and it looks clear. There's still metal on there, as you can see. Now on your first drain to fill, it'll probably be there's probably going to be a lot of stuff on there, but after for your other drain to fills, it should be like this, just not too much. Even this is a little much for this many drain and fills. Now, maybe before you drain your transmission, you should maybe get on the on-ramp of a highway and just put the pedal all the way down and make sure it's not slipping. Because if it's slipping, you'll feel that it's slipping. So do that before you do the drain and fill. If it doesn't slip, then do this drain and fill. And then the next thing you're going to have to do, you have to drive for about 100 miles before your transmission may shift worse with this new fluid. The computer basically needs to adapt to the new fluid. So you may have to drive about 100 miles before you see that it's shifting much better. And then after that, do that again, get on the on-ramp and put the pedal all the way down. If it doesn't slip, just move on to the next thing. Now, I like to drive my cars around town, right around 2,000 RPM, and when it shifts, you don't really feel the shifts. It should shift very smoothly. It's not going to shift as smooth as the new transmissions, because new ones now they're up to 8 gears. You have 9-gear transmissions, but this one should still shift fairly smoothly. Also, this fluid, if you don't have a Volvo, may be used in your car, because this fluid is used in a bunch of European cars, and also I believe it's also used in some Japanese cars. So definitely check that. Alright, I put the plug back in. Now it's time to refill it. And okay, so let me explain again the difference between a flush and a drain and fill. So a drain and fill, which is what we're doing. We're draining the fluid out of the transmission, but not the torque converter. And then a flush, what they do, if you take it to Volvo, for example, they will connect through the oil cooler. So there's an oil cooler line, and they will pass through about 16 liters of transmission fluid, and that will just clear everything out. The reason this may not be a good idea at first is because your pan, well, it has a bunch of stuff in there that you don't want in your transmission, and if you just flush it, all this debris may get loose and go up into the solenoids and clog them, and then you lose a gear. Now with this drain and fill, you're only removing 3.2 quarts, and if we go here, where is the transmission? There. Automatic transmission, it is 8 US quarts. So 8 quarts in total, and you're only removing 3.2 quarts. So you do need to do probably at least 3 drain and fills to really get most of it out. I'm doing 5 because mine was just so bad. That's why. Also, if you look here, it tells you what fluids you could put in here. Now, I would not put any of these fluids in here. What I would do is just stick with the Volvo OEM fluid or the aisin OEM fluid, since they made the transmission. They typically manufacture their fluids specifically for certain transmissions. So definitely stay with that to really extend the life of your transmission. Because if you put cheap transmission fluid, it's probably going to fail. Same with any car or any fluid. Every single fluid in your car has to be changed. None of it is lifetime. Which is why it's kind of frustrating when cars are starting to say, yeah, that's lifetime, that's lifetime. It is not. It's not lifetime. You have to actually change it. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and refill it with this long funnel. First, I have to change the battery in the camera. It is about to die. Oh, that's not going to work. Alright, I poured in about 3.1 quarts, and so you're going to check the cold stat. Now the engine has to be running, but let me show you before it gets mixed up with the torque converter fluid. That is really the type of fluid you want to see. Completely clear, and it doesn't focus. There we go. You see that? That is beautiful. Now put it in so that you can see the cold side. Because, I mean, you have to measure it when it's hot, but you don't want to drive around if it's way too low or if you overfill it. Alright, now I'm inside the car. I'm going to start it, but first I'm going to go here. So if you have a 98 or an 850, then you'll have 3 buttons here. We have winter mode, which is really fluid killer mode. It basically starts the gear to start the transmission in 3rd gear, which means the torque converter is really going to heat up the fluid, because you're going to have power, but you're not going to have a lot of torque with that. Then you have economy mode, and then super pursuit mode. So these modes are useful, because if you're going to drive fast, press the S. If you're going to drive normally, then press the E. Well, this one is just the 99 is just supposed to kind of learn off of it. And of course, you have the 5-speed. You're gonna have here. I just have 3. On my 2002, there's 4, 3, and L. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and get stuck again. There we go. Let's go ahead and start this. There we go. Started right up. Now I'm gonna let it run for a few seconds. Okay. Okay, I'm hearing some strange noises. Just needs time. And now I'm gonna put it in reverse. Oh, I didn't even feel it go in reverse. And I'm gonna take it off the ramps. Oh, alright, here we go. Now that we are off the ramps, what I'm gonna do is I went through reverse. I'm gonna go into neutral for a few seconds. Then you're gonna go into drive. And then you're gonna press the, I guess, the winner mode to engage 3rd gear. There's 3rd gear. Yeah, if I release the brake, the car barely moves. And there we go. Now there's still 2nd gear and 4th gear that you need to engage, and of course the torque converter has unlocked. But before you're driving, we need to check the level. Alright, so here it is. We're going to pull this out. I'm going to go ahead and wipe that down in a second. Alright, put in the cold side. And there you go. It is right in the middle of it. So now, put it back in on the hot side and let's see it out. Alright, so now I put the dipstick back in for the hot side, and now you're going to have to drive, I don't know, wherever, how hot it is outside. Here it is 83 degrees, it's almost 7 in the morning, and I'm just going to drive around for about 15 minutes, and then I'll check the hot side of the fluid. Alright, here I am at a red light. Now, if you don't know how the transmission light looks, basically if you put the car in 3 or L, that is the transmission light. Now if you're in drive or park and this light comes on, that means you have a code stored. If you've just changed the fluid, that's actually really bad. That means that it may have detected it slipped. So yeah, be aware of that. Alright. Alright, so the rational thing to do is to get on the on-ramp. Let's see here, it's a little bit Alright, now I'm off the highway. I definitely do not drive that aggressively. I just want to make sure the transmission doesn't slip. So far now it's not slipping. I just checked the level is good. So, yeah, now I'm just gonna do some normal acceleration. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and check the fluid. Get a piece of paper. There we go. There it is. That is the perfect level.